Good day everyone, and welcome to the first 2.8 tutorial. Super awesome. The irony is we're actually redoing an old one. Link in the description to the original one. So what we're going to be doing is the action backgrounds as you have seen just now, and I'm going to save before I do anything else since 2.8 is still extremely unstable. Okay, so getting rid of that shape, we are going to add a cylinder. We're going to be deleting the faces. There we go. Top and bottom faces. And we are going to add a seam. Control E, mark seam. There we go. Tab out, front. And select all. Unwrap cylinder projection. I want to show you guys what that looks like. If you look at it now, you can see that the faces adjacent to the seam mark the seam. It's really cool. Okay, so let's go Object and Smooth Shade, and of course we have to cone it. Now don't be shocked if you see some weird normal stuff going on in the middle. It happens. Don't be shocked by it. Okay, so shader editor, after saving 1,000 times. And let's get rid of that. Add an emission shader. We use an emission shader because we don't need shading for this. It's just absolutely not necessary. We don't need a light for it. You can see we use incredibly low samples. You just need a camera and a cylinder. Okay, and of course we need to set up a proper shader for all this. Just want to create a little bit more space. I don't like working top and bottom with this. Don't know why. I just not comfortable with it. It's like I want the headroom. Weird, so weird. Okay, and we are going to be using a noise texture. Now, something different about Eevee and Cycles is that the center point for the texture is not the same as with Blender Render. Blender Render has a tendency to make the middle of your UV unwrapping your center, so that if you say scale x -1, it would actually flip around the center of the UV unwrapping. I'm using this node as an example. It strangely enough seems to be using like this corner over here of the unwrapping. It's the strangest thing for me personally. I can't fault them on it. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's different. So we have to play to that. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that in a second. We just want to duplicate these two because we have to, you know, make it seamless. That's the whole point of it. So get a mix node, color mix node. You'll notice I haven't switched to shader mode just yet. Shaded mode, sorry. The reason I haven't switched yet is because this process has to, you know, kind of be a little bit more snappy. Every change you make makes the shader reload. It's a little bit frustrating, but I know that, you know, as 2.8 develops, it'll get faster and all that kind of stuff. This is just a preliminary kind of situation. So let's also add a gradient texture. The gradient texture is purely to create a mask. It mixes our noise textures together. So if you were to look at the gradient texture only, this is what you would see as is. Just like that. Now that's absolutely fine because we are still using the UV coordinates. We don't need to adjust it. We will need to adjust a different one later, but for the masking, this one is absolutely perfect. So if I were to connect this right now, this is what you would see. You can see there's a very strong seam right there where we placed it. As silly as it sounds. So what we're going to do is we're going to be making this one -1. 1, sorry. And you can see immediately it's no longer seamed. And I don't know how that works. Don't ask me how, I have no idea. So in this instance, we're going to be making the texture fairly huge, very finely detailed, and we're going to change the Y scale to stretch it out. So about the same value that you make your texture size, that's the amount that you stretch it. Don't worry about the weirdness of these lines. When you subdivide it, it goes away. Let's just strengthen them up a little bit. Let me get a color ramp. Let's use ease. It's a very cool glass-like effect. I like it. Okay, let's add the subdivision so we can just see a little bit more clearly what we're working with. Okay, that's better. Don't need to have many subdivisions, one is more than enough. I like that. I do think it's a little bit heavy. Let's see what happens if we make it like 0.5. I like that, that's pretty. Remember, there's no, this is the only way to do it kind of method. Just work with what you got, honestly. I did notice, honestly, that it seems if you just want to see what makes if I like that. Don't add too many lines. I've noticed that if you have maximum length, one cloud piece from center to edge, it really seems to move adequately, match the original intent more. Try to keep it to like one piece, but I'm not going to one piece. Funny. That was actually totally unintended. Just try to make it fit whatever you're using it for. If you need many more lines, then use many more lines. I'm just saying that for me it matches the goal more if it has only like one cloud stripe. I just want to see if I can make it just a little bit finer. Yeah, I like that. That's pretty. So let's get another mapping node in here. You see, guys, I'll show you that in a second. That's what I was talking about, the normal issues. I don't know what causes it, but it's there, and I don't like it. Okay, so I'm going to leave that on point, and I'm going to make this. Sorry, it's wrong one. No, it's the right one. Oh, this is the problem. Sorry. It's just you have to rotate it 90 degrees to make it go from vertical to horizontal. For some reason that's on the z-axis. Don't ask me why. It's just know it's on the z-axis. You can try doing other stuff. It's again that weird cornering issue. And then of course you have to shift it to make it fit. So I'm sure if you go like -1, it might, -90, it might fit. Let's see. -90. Yeah, see, if you use -90, boom, there you go. Okay, whatever. Learn something new every minute. Okay, so let's flip this one and let's create a color scheme. I personally really like that orangey kind of thing, but I think we should go for blue in this instance. I really like the blue. It has to be kind of a darker blue though. So let's take the... Still want it to be fairly saturated, but darker. Okay, that's good. And this has to be white, and this one is going to be like an aqua color. Has to be fairly strong because we do want that slight overlay kind of look. And this one I'm going to have to, not that intensely, but it has to be bright. Not too bright though. Let's set this to that spline, whatever you want to call it, thing, and see what that does. I kind of like that. That's pretty. Okay. So now we multiply our lines over that using mix RGB, because we obviously want our black lines there, like that. But we do want them to affect the color a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. So in order to do that, we can either extend this a little bit and up the brightness, or we can choose a different mixing method. Personally, I like using multiply, and I'm just going to up the brightness of the white a little bit just to affect it. So I'm just going to reduce that a little bit and bring it up a little bit more and take it back. You can see that it starts breaking up the circle. I love that. It's very beautiful. Now the example I posted a few days ago wasn't as smooth as this one. It had a much sharper look. You can go for a sharper look. In this instance, I'm just going for something a little bit softer. I really like it. Okay, let's go mix. And now we have to add just a little bit white back in that little center area over there. Just get the same one, and we will be adding this. So add 100% and flip it. Okay. I want to use this B-spleen thing because it gives me a little bit more control over it. I do want the black to be stronger. There we go, look at that. See, we just want a little bit of that softness back. Just like that. Absolutely stunning. Okay. Now we have an animation problem. I don't know if you guys read the description of the test video, but these nodes do not allow you to change the curve or the easing method or frame interpolation method. I failed to get the term now. But there is a way around it. The Lord showed me this way. It is just absolutely awesome. What you do is you use a custom property to drive your animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Object Properties, and we're going to add a custom property in there. We're going to edit it, and we're just going to call this animation. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just give it some really strong negative values and really strong positive values so that it still responds as if it doesn't have an end or a beginning. Okay, so you copy the data path, and now we're going to add the driver. Now what we did with copy data path is tell Blender that this is the information that we want, and it's holding it on the clipboard. So what you do when you add a driver for the y-axis, because that's what we're animating, if you add a driver, you have to tell it you want a single property, and it's an object property. You select the object it applies to, and then it asks you for a path. That's the data path over here. Oh goodness. So just edit driver and paste it in that box right there. Just Control V. Mouse over it, Control V. I don't like that. I don't know why it does that. I see why it does that actually. It's the value that's already there that's added to the variable, and I don't know why it does that. For some reason it seems to be a workflow thing that they decided is necessary. I don't work with drivers very often, so I can't say for sure that that's necessarily a good thing. Okay, so do the same thing with this y value. Add driver, get rid of that. Change that to single property, select the cylinder, and paste the data path because we have to use the exact same value. So if you were to move that value now, look at that. Isn't that just the coolest thing ever? So what you can do now is you can animate this value by going back to frame 1, which we are already on. As you can see, I've configured mine to look a lot like 2.7. So we're going to add a keyframe in here, and we're going to add a keyframe at the end. Let's make it 12. And now we have to change the graph editor. So going to the graph editor, you can see that it's Bezier curve as usual. Press V, set it to vector. I think it's Control E. No, it's Shift E, and set it to linear. What's that? Easing type. It was easing type. Okay. Okay, so let's just see how fast this thing runs. Yeah, it's way too slow. Little bit faster. Little bit faster. You can even go a little bit faster than that. Yeah, I like that. That's still a little slow. It's very subjective. I think it depends on the scene as well, but I think this is fast enough, honestly. Okay, so now we can do our shape keys. Now the shape keys are purely to enable us to put the cone in a corner or at the top or in the middle or whatever. It just gives you the ability to use this cone for whatever kind of shot that you want that uses this color. So obviously the camera needs to be repositioned and it needs to be set to a proper rotation and it needs to be moved down. If you want to, you can flatten the cone at this point. I don't want to do that personally. It's just personal preference. So I'm just going to move it so that it fits properly. I'm going to give it a little bit more space so I can see it more clearly. Okay, a little higher, just like that. That's beautiful. So if you were to play this back right now, this is what you would see. Oh goodness. I had playback there in the wrong definition. Yeah, I think we can make the stripes a little bit shorter. They're just a smidge too long for my taste. So let's say 15. What does 15 look like? 15 looks very fast. So let's just move this over. I like that, that's very pretty. We can definitely deal with the brightness here a little bit. Oh, okay, I like that. Make it faster. Something like that. Still soft, but gets us the right look. Okay, that's really great. Okay, let's save that, obviously. Okay, shape keys. So tab, you'll notice that it's still selected if you didn't deselect it. You go to the vertex options right there. Shape keys should be open by default. I didn't open it. You have to be out of edit mode to add the basis. Just click this little box and let's add 4 shape keys. So this one will be top, top, bottom, left and right. Just with these 4 we can place it pretty much anywhere in the camera's view. So set that to 1 and let's move it up. Okay, take it down, bottom, take it back, left. Imagine me pulling this thing right when I say left. Hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Why did I tab out? Don't need to tab out. Okay, and of course right. Okay. Now, as you can see with this we can move it anywhere, and this is pretty much where I had the example right about there. I personally really like it if it's in the left corner at the top. So I'm going to put it right, for goodness sake. I'm going to put it right there, just like that. Look at that. Love it. So cool. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it. Now you just need to render it. So to render it out, you go to this little printer icon. I think that's very clever. It takes a little while to get used to that though. You have to set your frame rate, of course your frame range. I go for 300, it's 10 seconds. Relative directory, and let's call this tutorial result. And we've got override file extension, When I export my final footage, I export to JPEG. When I'm still going to work with the footage and edit it and all that kind of stuff, I use PNG. The reason for that is PNG is massive, but it retains the quality. The reason why I use JPEG for the final is with only one instance of further compression, there is very little to no obvious degradation in quality, at least not as far as I'm experienced. So that's just something you can consider. Personally, I like using JPEG. So I don't use overwrite because I tend to accidentally overwrite stuff that I don't want overwritten. We're not going to be using any post-processing, so that is not an issue. Obviously full HD, that's great. We're using low samples, so it's very quick. One thing I've noticed with Eevee's rendering is that it is faster if while it's rendering you set your interface, anything that has to do with the 3D view, if you set that on the text editor. Now, it doesn't mean the text editor specifically is the fastest. It just matters that you get the 3D view out of sight because it renders with the graphics card. So everything that it has to render along is going to pull it down. I've noticed like it's like twice as fast if I put it on the text editor so that it's not visible. So if you want to know where that is, you go here in the render menu thing and you go display mode. You can see that it says full screen, image editor, new window, and keep user interface. I suggest you tick keep user interface because new window is super annoying, and I don't think if you render a sequence you can just close it personally. I don't use the lock interface because I want to be able to, you know, adjust the timeline or whatever to see clearer. If I forget, then I can't see. I have to stop the render. So just keep user interface so you can change it yourself. Okay, so that is great. I'm not going to be rendering it like right now. I just want to show you guys how you can do this with a plane as well. I just want to move this cone out of the way, and I want to add a plane. Just unwrap it, nothing fancy. Scale it out, scale it down so that it fits the frame, and create a new material for it under the shader editor. Okay, so let's call this one plane. Okay, set this to Eevee, take it off this so we can just build the material first. We're going to be using a UV coordinate again. Vector mapping. I have to say this is going a lot faster than I anticipated. Getting a noise texture in there, and we also want a gradient texture. So getting a gradient texture. I think this has to be rotated. So I'm just going to add this in here as well. I think I'm going to rotate it before I do anything else. So get a color ramp. I'm going to go for one of those that has like a really bright center and it fades out to the edges. You know, it just gets darker towards the edges. Yeah, fades out. Anyway, so let's get a math node. I'm sure you guys have already figured out where I'm going with this, and if you haven't, stay tuned. Converter math and greater than. Okay. And of course an emission shader. Almost forgot the shader. Okay, so before I do anything else, I want to make sure that this thing is rotated correctly. See, it's not. It's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Okay, that's really cool. And let's check this thing out because this thing has to be a certain way as well. Okay, has to be nice and thin. Something like that should do. Okay. So let's check that out. That's actually cooler than what I did earlier. I think we should keep it this way. Yeah, I like that. I just want to see if I can make this a little bit... Yeah, that's cool. Now we just need to adjust it, or animate it. Sorry, not adjust it. So I have to find out what axis is actually going to move along. Okay, it's going to move along the x-axis. So again, object properties, add a custom property. Let's call this one linear animation. Same situation, minus large number plus large number. I think this is statically overrideable or whatever, will make it open, but I've not messed with that yet. It's not finished, 2.8, so this is a safe way that I know works. So if you want to try that, please do give that a shot, but you do it at your own risk. So add a driver for the X, and of course it's just variable. We want the plane this time. We only want a single property, and no, that's not what I want. I want the data path. I copied the value, my bad. Okay, there we go. Okay, we don't need to add it to anything else, but we are going to add it to the z-axis. Now the reason we're adding it to the z-axis is because we want the lines to morph just a smidge as they move. It just adds a little bit more dynamic to the animation. So in order to make that work for what we want, we have to just make sure we have the value in here. Okay, now first of all, when you're going to move this, it's actually going to either be static and do that, or it's just going to look ridiculous. In order to fix this, to get the right value, just divide the variable. This does look kind of cool, but it's not what we're looking for. So you edit the driver and you divide it by roughly 22, like I said. It's just from experience. You can make it more, make it less. It's up to you. So this is going to be barely noticeable, but it definitely makes a difference. I think I'm going to make it a little bit more. Let's make it 15. I want to see what it does at 15. Oh, we can do a little bit more than that. I like this. I'm getting a different result than I did earlier today. Yeah, I like that. That's really cool. Okay. So, of course, we just add a keyframe. Move it up. Which direction are we going in? Okay. Yeah, let's make it that way. It just feels more natural. Okay, get a graph editor. V for vector. I think it's no, Shift E. I keep wanting to do Control E. Okay, so let's just make sure this is running nice. I think it's just a little bit slow. I like that. That's nice. Okay, I am liking this. Let's just go into the shader editor. I just want to give it some more lines like that. And I also want to make these values just a little bit brighter so we have some more stretch towards the edges. Like that. That's really cool. Now, of course, you can also invert this by going less than, and that gives you the opposite effect. So it's entirely up to you what you want. I personally really like the dark line in the middle. Initially I wanted to go with the light one in the middle, but I like this. I like this a lot. So obviously you can be creative with this. I'll show you guys some examples at the end of the video. You can mix different colors to represent the background that's moving. You can make custom colors to add to the emotion of the character, but there's one thing that is really, really cool that you can do with this, and that is very expressive. So I'm going to move this one over, and I'm going to get the cone back. Let's just put it back in the center, and I'm going to recenter it. Let me just get the vector. I'll put it back on what it was earlier afterwards, but I just want to show you guys what it looks like. I just want to save it before I do, lest I lose the value. Okay, so what happens is you invert it so that you get colored lines instead of black lines, and that looks like this. And then you can animate it to get bigger or whatever. You can use this for the start of an explosion. You can use this as the start of a punch, or the landing of a punch, actually, sorry. Or, you know, whatever. It can be used for impact, it can be used for stars, it can be used to introduce a distant object that's coming like really fast. It doesn't have to just like continue going as an action background. You can adapt it, you know. So I really, really like this, where you just intensify the color aspect of it. I'll show a really cool example at the end of the video, which should be now anyway. Like that. And that is it for this tutorial. I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you guys use 2.8 in your projects. Have a great one, and God bless you.